The first time I realized something was wrong was when the smell of coffee made me gag. Not just any coffee, the expensive Colombian blend that Liam, my roommate, brewed every morning. The scent had always been a comfort, a signal that another day had begun, that I had survived another night. But that morning, as the aroma wafted under my bedroom door, my stomach lurched violently, and I barely made it to the bathroom in time. Hunched over the toilet, hair sticking to my sweat-slicked forehead, I tried to convince myself it was just a stomach bug. Just stress. Just anything but what I feared it might be. "Emma, you okay in there?" Liam's voice came through the door, concerned but distant, as if he was already late for his shift at the hospital. "Fine," I croaked, my throat raw. Must have eaten something bad. I heard his footsteps retreat, followed by the front door closing. The apartment fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady drip of the bathroom faucet I'd been meaning to fix for weeks. Slowly, I pulled myself up, catching my pale reflection in the mirror. Dark circles hung beneath my hazel eyes like bruises, my chestnut hair a tangled mess around my thin face. I looked haunted, or hunted. Neither was far from the truth. As I brushed my teeth to rid my mouth of the acrid taste, my mind drifted to 6 weeks earlier. To the mistake that could change everything. To him. I hadn't meant to end up at that charity gala. I was just a last-minute replacement, a waitress filling in for a coworker who'd called in sick. The event was at the Obsidian, the most exclusive hotel in the city, where the minimum room rate exceeded my monthly rent, a place where people like me served people like him. Alessandro Vitale. Even thinking his name sent a chill down my spine. Most people in our city knew of him, the young, devastatingly handsome heir to the Vitale family business interests. The papers called him a legitimate businessman, but everyone knew the truth. The Vitales had controlled the city's underworld for generations. They were untouchable, and Alessandro was their crown prince. I remembered how the room had changed when he entered, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Conversations hushed, bodies shifted instinctively to accommodate his presence. He moved with the casual confidence of a predator in its natural habitat, flanked by 2 men whose bulky suits couldn't quite conceal their weapons. I hadn't meant to catch his eye. I was nobody. Just another black-uniformed server holding a tray of champagne flutes. But as I navigated around a cluster of bejeweled women, I'd stumbled, nearly sending my tray crashing to the marble floor. A strong hand had steadied me, gripping my elbow with surprising gentleness. "Careful," he'd said, his voice low and smooth like aged whiskey. I'd looked up and felt the air leave my lungs. Alessandro Vitale was even more striking up close, piercing amber eyes beneath dark brows, high cheekbones and a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow. Lips curved into a slight smile that didn't quite reach those unsettling eyes. He smelled of expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, more primal. I'm sorry, sir." "Thank you," I'd stammered, mortified. His grip had lingered a moment too long. "What's your name?" The question had frozen me. Staff were meant to be invisible at these events, not engaging with the guests, certainly not with someone like him. "Emma," I'd answered, against my better judgment. "Emma," he'd repeated, as if tasting the word. "I haven't seen you before. I'm just filling in tonight." I desperately scanned the room for my supervisor, praying she wouldn't see me talking to a guest. Alessandro had followed my gaze, seeming to understand my anxiety. "Don't worry. No one will say anything." The casual certainty in his voice had sent another chill through me. Of course no one would say anything. No one would dare. He'd taken a champagne flute from my tray, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Emma." The way he'd said my name made it sound like a secret between us. I'd thought that would be the end of it. A brief, strange encounter to tell Liam about later. I was wrong. At the end of my shift, as I collected my coat from the staff room, my supervisor had approached with an envelope. "This was left for you," she'd said, her expression unreadable. Inside was a hotel keycard and a note on thick cream stationery. "Room 1520. A conversation. Nothing more. A." I should have thrown it away. I should have left immediately. But curiosity, or something more dangerous, had made me take the elevator to the 15th floor. I told myself I was just going to return the key, to politely decline whatever conversation he was offering. I told myself I wasn't flattered by the attention of someone like him, someone powerful and dangerous and beautiful. I told myself many lies that night. Room 1520 was a suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape. Alessandro stood silhouetted against the view, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He'd removed his tie and unbuttoned his collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin. "You came," he'd said simply, turning to face me. I shouldn't be here. My voice had sounded small in the vast room. Yet here you are. He'd gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. Would you like a drink?" I'd remained standing. "I can't stay. I just came to..." "Return the key?" His smile had been knowing. Then why not give it to the front desk? I hadn't had an answer. What followed was unexpected. We'd talked. Just talked. About books we'd read, places we wanted to see. He'd ordered food, ridiculously expensive dishes that I pretended to be familiar with. He'd asked about my life, seeming genuinely interested in my mundane struggles, my student debt, my shared apartment, my dreams of finishing my nursing degree someday. Not once had he mentioned his family or business. Not once had he made an inappropriate advance, until I'd gotten up to leave hours later, lightheaded from wine and attention. "Will you stay?" he'd asked. Suddenly close, his hand warm on my waist. I should have said no. Now, 6 weeks later, I splashed cold water on my face and tried to gather my courage. I needed to know for sure. I dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, grabbed my purse, and headed to the corner pharmacy, avoiding eye contact with the cashier as I purchased a pregnancy test. Back in my bathroom, I followed the instructions with trembling hands, then set the test on the counter and paced the small space while waiting for the result. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. When I finally forced myself to look, 2 pink lines stared back at me. Undeniable and life-altering. Pregnant. I sank to the floor, clutching the test in my shaking hand. What was I going to do? I was 25, barely making ends meet, still trying to piece together enough money to finish my nursing program. I had no family to help. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 19, leaving me alone except for Liam, my childhood friend who'd offered me his spare room when I could no longer afford my own place. And the father. I hadn't seen Alessandro since that night. He'd asked for my number, but I'd been too overwhelmed by what had happened between us to give it to him. Too ashamed of how easily I'd fallen into his bed, how desperately I'd responded to his touch. Too terrified of what it might mean to be connected to someone like him. But there was something else. A secret I'd been carrying that made this situation even more dangerous. A secret about why I'd really been at that gala. Before I could spiral further, my phone buzzed with a text from my boss at the diner where I worked. She needed me to come in early to cover for another server. I welcomed the distraction. Work would keep my mind occupied, give me time to think about what to do next. The diner was busier than usual for a Tuesday, the lunch rush in full swing when I arrived. I tied on my apron and threw myself into taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and balancing plates along my arm. The mindless routine was comforting. It was during a rare quiet moment, as I wiped down a vacated booth, that I felt it, that peculiar shift in the atmosphere that I'd only experienced once before. The ambient noise of the diner seemed to dim. Heads turned subtly toward the entrance. I didn't need to look up to know who had walked in. My body sensed his presence before my mind could process it, like prey instinctively aware of a predator. Slowly, I straightened and turned. Alessandro Vitale stood just inside the entrance, as out of place in this greasy spoon diner as a wolf in a petting zoo. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, his dark hair perfectly styled, his face impassive as his amber eyes scanned the room, then locked on me. My heart stuttered. How had he found me? Why was he here? He moved toward me with that same fluid grace I remembered, his bodyguard hovering near the door, watching everything. The other customers pretended not to stare, but I could feel their curiosity like a tangible thing. "Emma," Alessandro said when he reached me, his voice just as I remembered. Deep, smooth, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, suddenly conscious of my cheap polyester uniform, my hair hastily pulled back, the smudge of ketchup on my sleeve. "We need to talk." His expression revealed nothing, but there was a tension in his jaw, a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. My manager appeared at my elbow, her eyes wide with recognition and fear. "Emma, you can take your break now if you need to." I nodded numbly, untying my apron with clumsy fingers. Alessandro waited silently, his presence filling the small diner like smoke, making it hard to breathe. I led him to the alley behind the diner, where employees took their smoke breaks. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching snow and garbage from the nearby dumpster. I hugged myself against the cold, wishing I'd grabbed my coat. "How did you find me?" I asked, my breath clouding in the chilly air. Alessandro shrugged slightly. "Finding people is not difficult for me." The casual statement sent ice through my veins. Of course it wasn't. People like him had resources, connections. The thought that he could locate me so easily made me feel exposed, vulnerable. "Why are you here?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's been weeks." His expression darkened. "You disappeared. You didn't give me a way to contact you." "I didn't think you'd want to." He took a step closer, and it took all my willpower not to back away. "You thought wrong." I didn't know what to say to that. My mind was racing, trying to understand what he could possibly want from me, terrified that somehow he knew about the pregnancy already, but that was impossible. "I have to get back to work," I said, moving to step around him. His hand shot out, gripping my upper arm, not painfully, but firmly enough to stop me. "I saw you at the gala last night," he said. My blood froze. "What?" "With Marcus Blackwood." The name hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Marcus Blackwood, Alessandro's chief business rival in the city, the head of the organization that had been trying to muscle in on Vitale territory for years. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, panic rising in my throat. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me, Emma. I saw you. Same uniform, same company, different name tag." I swallowed hard. It was true. After our night together, I'd switched my shifts at the catering company to avoid any chance of running into him again. But last night, they'd been short-staffed for the Blackwood Foundation fundraiser, and the money they'd offered was too good to pass up. I'd thought it would be safe, that Alessandro wouldn't be at his rival's event, that even if by some chance he was, he wouldn't recognize one server among dozens. I'd been wrong, again. "It was just a job," I said. "I serve at events. That's what I do." His grip tightened slightly. "And did you serve Blackwood the same way you served me?" The accusation stung like a slap. "Is that what you think happened between us? That I serviced you?" I wrenched my arm from his grasp, anger momentarily overriding fear. "I'm not a prostitute." Something flashed in his eyes, regret perhaps, or surprise at my defiance. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." I wrapped my arms around myself again, suddenly exhausted. "Look, I need this job. I can't afford to be picky about which events I work." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate movements, he reached into his suit jacket and extracted a white plastic stick that made my heart stop. My pregnancy test, the one I'd taken that morning, the one I'd wrapped in toilet paper and buried in the bathroom trash. "Is this baby mine?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. Time seemed to stop in that dirty alley. The distant sounds of traffic, the clatter of dishes from the diner's kitchen vent, the cold wind against my face. Everything faded away as I stared at the pregnancy test in Alessandro's hand. "How did you—" My voice cracked. "Did you go through my trash?" His expression remained impassive, but something dangerous flickered in those amber eyes. "Answer the question, Emma." My mind raced, grasping for explanations, excuses, lies. But as I stood there, shivering in the November chill, facing a man who commanded an empire built on blood and fear, I couldn't summon the energy to fabricate another deception. "Yes," I whispered, the word hanging between us like a live grenade with its pin removed. Alessandro's face revealed nothing, but I noticed his free hand clench into a tight fist at his side. "You weren't going to tell me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I only found out this morning." "And if you'd known a week ago, a month, Would you have told me then? His voice remained eerily calm, which somehow frightened me more than if he'd shouted. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. The truth was, I didn't know what I would have done. Part of me had considered terminating the pregnancy without ever informing him. Another part had fantasized about disappearing, starting over somewhere he couldn't find me. Both options now seemed laughably naive. I don't know, I admitted. Alessandro stepped closer, his expensive cologne mingling with the alley's sour odors. Look at me. I forced myself to meet his eyes. This changes everything. His voice had softened slightly, but there was steel beneath the velvet. You're coming with me. Now. Fear clawed up my throat. What? No, I can't just leave. I have a job. Responsibilities. Those are no longer your concern. He took my elbow, guiding me toward the mouth of the alley where a sleek black SUV with tinted windows had appeared. His bodyguard stood beside it, vigilant eyes scanning the surroundings. Wait, I pleaded, digging in my heels. I need to tell my manager. Get my things. Alessandro's grip tightened fractionally. Your manager has been informed that you've had a family emergency. Your belongings will be collected and brought to you. The casual way he'd reorganized my life in a matter of minutes sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold. You can't just... I can, he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. And I will. You're carrying my child, Emma. That makes your safety my priority. Safety. The word echoed in my mind as he opened the SUV's rear door. What did he think was threatening me, or was he the threat I needed protection from? Please. I tried one last time. I need time to think, to process this. Something in my voice must have reached him because he paused, his hand still on my elbow. For a moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath his composed exterior, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Time is a luxury we don't have, he said quietly. There are complications. Before I could ask what he meant, a black sedan screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. Alessandro's bodyguard moved with startling speed, drawing his weapon as he positioned himself between us and the newcomers. Inside. Now. Alessandro's voice left no room for objection as he practically lifted me into the SUV, climbing in after me. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut was two men emerging from the sedan, their expressions grim and purposeful. Then we were speeding away, the SUV's powerful engine carrying us from the familiar surroundings of my mundane life into Alessandro's dangerous world. Inside the vehicle, the sudden silence was oppressive. The interior was luxurious. Butter-soft leather seats, privacy partition separating us from the driver, subtle lighting that made even my panic-stricken face look softened. I pressed myself against the door, as far from Alessandro as the confined space allowed. Who were those men? I finally asked. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Blackwood's people. Why would they? I stopped as realization dawned. They were following me? They've been watching you since the gala, he confirmed, his voice cold with controlled rage. Did you speak with Blackwood that night? I swallowed hard, memories flooding back. Marcus Blackwood approaching me during a quiet moment. His smile cordial but his eyes calculating as he asked seemingly innocent questions about my work, my background, how often I served at Vitali events. Briefly, I admitted. He just made small talk. Alessandro cursed under his breath, something rapid and Italian that I couldn't catch. And you didn't think that was strange? That a man like Blackwood would take an interest in a server? The accusation in his tone sparked my own anger. No stranger than a man like you taking an interest. I thought he was just being friendly. Rich people do that sometimes. Pretend to care about the help to feel better about themselves. His eyes flashed. Is that what you think happened between us? That I was amusing myself with the help? What am I supposed to think? I gestured helplessly. You're... you. And I'm nobody. You're the mother of my child. The word sent a shiver through me. That makes you somebody very important indeed. The SUV turned onto an exclusive street lined with ancient trees and imposing mansions set back behind ornate gates. We slowed in front of one particularly intimidating property, a sprawling Italian-style villa with a circular drive and meticulously maintained grounds. 2 more SUVs flanked the entrance, men in dark suits standing at attention. "Where are we?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "My home," Alessandro replied simply. "You're home now." Panic surged again. "I'm not moving in with you. I barely know you." He turned to face me fully, his expression severe. "You know me well enough to have created a life with me, and circumstances have eliminated your choices in this matter." "What circumstances?" "Those men." "Who are they really?" Alessandro was silent as the SUV pulled to a stop. Only when his bodyguard had opened the door and scanned the surroundings did he answer. "Blackwood has been looking for leverage against me for years. You, and now our child, are that leverage." The implications of his statement hit me like a physical blow. "You think he would hurt me to get to you?" "I know he would." Alessandro's voice was flat, certain. "He's killed for less." He guided me out of the vehicle and toward the villa's imposing entrance. The interior was as opulent as I'd imagined. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, priceless artwork, all in shades of cream, gold, and deep burgundy. A small staff appeared and then discreetly vanished, trained to be invisible in the presence of their employer. Alessandro led me to a sitting room where a fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace. "You'll stay here until the situation is resolved," he said, as if announcing I'd be kept overnight instead of held prisoner indefinitely. "And how long will that take?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "As long as necessary." His tone suggested the topic was closed. "I can't just disappear from my life. People will notice. My roommate, my coworkers. They'll be told you've taken an extended leave for personal reasons." He moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. "Your roommate, Liam, isn't it, has already been contacted." The casual mention of Liam's name sent ice through my veins. "What did you do to him?" Alessandro's eyebrow raised slightly. "Nothing. We simply informed him you were safe and would be away for some time." "And he believed that?" "He had no reason not to." Alessandro sipped his drink, "especially after receiving enough money to cover a year of your shared rent." I sank onto a plush sofa, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. "You bought my friend's silence. I ensured he wouldn't worry or contact authorities." Alessandro sat opposite me, his movements elegant despite the tension evident in his shoulders. "It was the simplest solution." "The simplest solution," I repeated hollowly. "Is that how you see everything? Problems to be eliminated, people to be managed?" Something flashed in his eyes, hurt perhaps, though I found that hard to believe. "Not everything. Not you." I looked away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. My hand unconsciously moved to my still flat stomach, a gesture Alessandro tracked with hawk-like attention. "How far along are you?" he asked, his voice softer than before. 6 weeks, I whispered. "From that night." He nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. "Have you seen a doctor?" "No. As I said, I only found out this morning." "You'll see my physician tomorrow. He's discreet and excellent." The calm way he continued reorganizing my life sparked fresh anger. "Don't I get any say in this? In any of it?" Alessandro set his tumbler down with deliberate care. "Would you prefer I left you unprotected? Left you vulnerable to Blackwood's men? They wouldn't hesitate to use you and our child to destroy me. Why would he care about me? About us?" I gestured between us. It was one night. We're nothing to each other. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Alessandro's expression hardened, his eyes turning cold. "You are carrying my heir," he said, each word precise and deadly. "The next generation of the Vitale family. That makes you everything to me." He rose and moved toward me with predatory grace. "And it makes you Blackwood's most valuable target." I shrank back against the sofa cushions as he loomed over me, his presence overwhelming in the luxurious room. "I need to understand something, Emma." His voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "How did Blackwood know to approach you specifically? Out of all the servers at the gala, why you?" Fear clawed at my throat as I stared up at him. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the question I couldn't answer without revealing my final, most damning secret. I don't know," I stammered. "Maybe he saw us talking that night, at the Obsidian. Maybe one of your enemies noticed and told him." Alessandro studied me for a long, terrifying moment. I could almost see the calculations behind his eyes, the weighing of possibilities. Perhaps, he finally said, though his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. Either way, you're not safe in your old life anymore. He straightened and moved toward the door. You'll be shown to your rooms. Everything you need has been provided. If there's anything specific you require, tell Maria. She'll see to it. He nodded toward a petite, middle-aged woman who had materialized silently in the doorway. So I'm a prisoner, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Alessandro paused, his hand on the doorframe. You're protected, he corrected. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. He turned back to me, his expression softening fractionally. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand the gravity of our situation. This isn't just about you and me anymore. His gaze dropped to my midsection, and for a moment I glimpsed something unexpected in his eyes. Not calculation or control, but wonder. Vulnerability. I never expected to have a child, he said quietly. In my world, family is both a strength and a fatal weakness. I had resigned myself to not taking that risk. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I saw past the dangerous facade to the man beneath, a man raised in violence who now faced the prospect of bringing new life into that same brutal world. I don't know how to be a father, he continued, more to himself than to me, but I do know how to protect what's mine. And I will protect you both, whatever the cost. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone with Maria, who smiled sympathetically. Come, miss, she said, her accent thick, but her English clear. You must be tired. Let me show you to your rooms. I followed numbly, too overwhelmed to resist. My mind whirled with the day's events, from discovering my pregnancy to being essentially abducted by the father, a mafia boss who now claimed me as his to protect. My life had unraveled in the span of hours, leaving me adrift in a world of luxury and danger that I barely comprehended. Maria led me up a grand staircase and down a corridor to a suite larger than my entire apartment. The bedroom featured a 4-poster bed draped in silk, a sitting area with plush chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. An adjoining bathroom gleamed with marble and gold fixtures. Mr. Vitale had these rooms prepared for you, Maria explained, opening a closet to reveal women's clothing in a range of sizes, all with designer labels I recognized but had never dreamed of owning. He wasn't sure of your size, so there are options. Tomorrow, a seamstress will come to measure you for a proper wardrobe. I ran my fingers over a cashmere sweater, its softness alien against my skin, accustomed to cheap polyester and cotton blends. This is insane, I murmured. Maria smiled kindly. Mr. Vitale wants you comfortable. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice. He was very specific about your care. I've never seen him so concerned. I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Alessandro Vitale, feared mafia boss, was concerned about my comfort seemed ludicrous, given that he'd essentially kidnapped me. Can I leave? I asked bluntly. If I wanted to walk out right now, would anyone stop me? Maria's expression grew troubled. It would not be safe, miss. The men outside, they are there to protect you. That's not what I asked. She looked away. Mr. Vitale has given orders. For your safety. Translation. I was indeed a prisoner, regardless of the gilded cage. After Maria left, I sank onto the edge of the enormous bed, trembling with exhaustion and shock. The silk duvet beneath my palms felt obscenely luxurious compared to my threadbare bedding at home. Home. A place I might never see again. I pulled out my phone, desperate to contact Liam to make sure he was truly okay. But the screen showed no service. Of course. Alessandro wouldn't have overlooked such an obvious means of communication. On the nightstand, I noticed a new phone, sleek, expensive, and undoubtedly monitored. I left it untouched. The room, for all its opulence, suddenly felt suffocating. I moved to the windows, searching for latches, an escape route, but they opened only a few inches, not even enough to feel the breeze. Through the glass, I could see armed men patrolling the grounds, Guards or jailers? The line seemed increasingly blurred. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. I hardly recognized the woman who stared back. Pale, frightened, with shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of secrets and fear. My hand drifted to my stomach, still flat beneath my diner uniform. A life grew there. Alessandro Vitale's child. The heir to a criminal empire. What had I done? The truth I'd been avoiding crashed over me in waves of nausea that sent me retching into the marble toilet. When the sickness passed, I curled on the cool tile floor, letting tears flow freely for the first time since this nightmare began. I don't know how long I lay there before a soft knock on the door roused me. "Miss? Are you all right?" Maria's concerned voice came through the wood. I hastily wiped my face and stood on shaky legs. "I'm fine. Dinner will be served in half an hour. Mr. Vitale requests your company." The thought of food made my stomach turn again, but I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I'll be there. There are clothes in the closet for you," she reminded me gently. "Perhaps you'd like to change." I looked down at my stained uniform, suddenly conscious of how out of place I must appear in this palatial setting. "Thank you. I'll find something." After a quick shower, I selected the least intimidating outfit I could find. Black slacks and a simple cream sweater that probably cost more than a month of my rent. The fabric caressed my skin like a whisper, a luxury I'd never experienced. Maria reappeared to escort me to dinner, leading me through corridors decorated with art that belonged in museums, not private homes. The dining room continued the theme of understated wealth. A long mahogany table that could seat 20, crystal chandelier casting warm light on silver place settings and fresh flowers. Alessandro stood as I entered, impeccably dressed in what I assumed was casual attire for him, tailored slacks and a charcoal cashmere sweater that made his amber eyes appear even more intense. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and the scent of his cologne, woodsy and masculine, reached me across the room. "You look better," he observed, pulling out a chair for me at the corner of the table closest to his place at the head. The table was set for just the two of us, turning the massive room strangely intimate. "Better than what?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice as I sat stiffly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Then a woman who just learned her life has been irreversibly altered." I had no response to that brutal honesty. Silent staff appeared with wine. Sparkling water for me, I noted, and the first course, some delicate arrangement of seafood I couldn't identify. I picked at it listlessly while Alessandro watched me with unnerving intensity. "You need to eat," he said finally. "For the baby." I set down my fork with deliberate care. "Is that all I am now? A vessel for your heir?" His expression hardened. "You know that's not true, do I? You've kidnapped me, isolated me, taken over my life, all for the sake of a child you didn't know existed until a few hours ago." "I did not kidnap you," he corrected, his voice dangerously soft. "I removed you from an increasingly dangerous situation, without my consent. There wasn't time for debate." I laughed without humor. "There's never time for debate with men like you, is there? Just commands to be followed, decisions made for others because you know best." Alessandro set his wineglass down with deliberate control. "Men like me?" he repeated. "And what kind of man do you think I am, Emma?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications. What kind of man was Alessandro Vitale? A criminal, certainly. Dangerous, undoubtedly. But also the father of my child. The man who had shown me gentleness and passion during our night together, who had talked with me for hours about books and dreams before ever touching me. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "That's the problem." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded as if I'd passed some test. "That's fair. We have much to learn about each other. Do we? Or will you simply dictate the terms of whatever this is going to be?" "That depends," he said, resuming his meal with perfect composure. "On what?" "On whether you can be honest with me," his amber eyes fixed on mine with predatory focus, "starting with why you were working Blackwood's event. The real reason." My breath caught. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the question that could destroy whatever tenuous safety I'd found in Alessandro's protection. "I told you," I began, hating how weak my voice sounded. It was just a job. I need the money. Alessandro set down his cutlery, his expression now completely closed. I'm going to give you one more chance to tell me the truth, Emma. After that, I'll have no choice but to find the answers elsewhere, and I promise you won't like my methods. The threat hung in the air between us, all pretense of civility stripped away. This was the man others feared, the ruthless head of a criminal organization who had clawed his way to power through violence and intimidation. Are you threatening me? I whispered. I'm promising you consequences for continued deception. He leaned forward slightly. You're carrying my child. That earns you considerations others wouldn't receive. But my patience has limits. The weight of my secrets pressed down on me like a physical thing. I'd been running for so long, hiding so much, and now, trapped in this beautiful prison with a dangerous man who held my future in his hands, I had nowhere left to hide. My father, I began, the words burning my throat like acid. Worked for the Blackwoods. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but I sensed his sudden, complete attention. He was their accountant, I continued, unable to stop now that I'd begun. Not for their legitimate businesses, but for the other things. He handled their money laundering, their offshore accounts, everything. Go on, Alessandro prompted when I hesitated. I took a shaky breath. When I was 19, the FBI approached him. They had enough evidence to put him away for decades, but they offered him a deal if he'd testify against Marcus Blackwood's father. Understanding dawned in Alessandro's eyes. The car accident that killed your parents. It wasn't a question. My blood ran cold at the realization that he'd investigated me, knew details of my past that I'd shared with no one. It wasn't an accident, I confirmed, my voice barely audible. The brakes were cut. Both my parents died instantly, and the FBI claimed they couldn't prove it was murder, said I had no case. I laughed bitterly, but they made sure I knew who was responsible. They wanted me angry, wanted me to help them build a new case against the Blackwoods. Alessandro's expression had grown thunderous. They used a grieving 19-year-old girl as bait. They offered me protection in exchange for information, I corrected. But I was too scared. I disappeared instead, changed my name, moved across the country, cut ties with everyone I knew. Emma isn't your real name, he said softly, another piece falling into place. I shook my head. It's Elizabeth. Elizabeth Calloway. Or it was. And you've been running ever since, until 6 months ago when they found me again. An FBI agent named Cooper. He said they'd kept tabs on me, that they knew I was struggling financially, that they could help if I'd just do one small thing for them. Alessandro's knuckles whitened around his wine glass. Infiltrate Blackwood's circle, get close enough to gather evidence. I nodded miserably. They wanted anything that could link him to illegal activities, conversations, documents, names. I took the catering job because they knew both the Blackwoods and the Vitalis used that company for their events. And then you met me, Alessandro said, his voice deceptively calm. Did they instruct you to sleep with me as well? To gather intelligence on both families? The accusation stung like a physical blow. No, I never planned for that to happen, yet it did. Quite convenient for your FBI handlers. Tears burned in my eyes. I haven't told them anything about you. About us. I couldn't. Why not? Wasn't that your mission? Because, I faltered, unable to articulate the confusion of emotions he stirred in me. Because it felt wrong. That night wasn't part of any plan. It was just real. Alessandro studied me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken accusations and confessions. Do they know you're pregnant? He finally asked. No one knows except you. I only found out this morning, remember? He nodded, seemingly lost in thought. When he spoke again, his voice had regained its usual controlled calm. Blackwood must have realized you were working both sides. That's why his men were following you. Or the FBI let something slip, I suggested. Agent Cooper isn't exactly subtle. Either way, you're compromised. Alessandro rose from his chair and moved to the window, his back to me. And now carrying my child, the Blackwoods would see that as an unexpected bonus. Leverage against both me and the FBI. The clinical way he assessed the situation sent a chill through me. So what happens now? He turned, his expression resolute. Now, I deal with the complications, all of them. Fear clutched at my throat. What does that mean? It means I protect what's mine. His eyes dropped to my stomach, then back to my face. It means I eliminate threats to your safety and the safety of our child. You can't just eliminate the FBI, I said, horrified by the implication. A cold smile touched his lips. You'd be surprised what I can do. Please, I whispered, rising from my chair. Don't make this worse. More violence won't solve anything. Violence is sometimes the only language men like Black would understand. Alessandro moved closer, his presence overwhelming my senses. You lied to me, Emma, or Elizabeth, or whatever your name truly is. You came into my life under false pretenses, working for people who would see me imprisoned. I backed away until I hit the edge of the table. I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. We always have choices. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a touch so gentle it made me tremble. You chose to come to my room that night. You chose to lie in my bed. You chose to keep our child a secret. And you chose to take me prisoner, I countered, even as I fought the urge to lean into his touch. I chose to protect you, he corrected, his voice dropping to a whisper. Despite your betrayal, despite the danger you represent to everything I've built, I chose to bring you into my home rather than eliminate the threat you pose. The casual way he referred to potentially eliminating me sent ice through my veins, even as his proximity ignited a treacherous heat low in my belly. Why? I dared to ask. Why not just solve the problem? His amber eyes darkened as they searched mine. Because from the moment I saw you, I wanted you in a way I've never wanted anyone. Because that night meant something to me too, something I can't explain or justify. His hand slid to cup the nape of my neck, his touch possessive yet tender. And now you carry my child, my blood. That makes you irreplaceable, regardless of your sins. Before I could respond, his lips claimed mine in a kiss that was both punishment and promise. Gentle, yet demanding. Against my better judgment, I responded, my body remembering the passion we'd shared, craving the connection despite everything that stood between us. When he finally pulled away, his breathing was as ragged as mine. His composure fractured to reveal the raw desire beneath. You belong to me now, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You and our child. I will destroy anyone who threatens that. Blackwood, the FBI, anyone. Do you understand? It wasn't a question so much as a declaration of intent, a glimpse into the dangerous mind of a man who had built an empire on violence and control. A man who now considered me his possession, to be protected and contained in equal measure. I understand, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I did, not fully, not the implications of being claimed by Alessandro Vitale, of carrying his heir, of being drawn into his dangerous world with no way back to the life I'd known. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, as if satisfied. Tomorrow you'll see the doctor, then we'll discuss our next steps. He straightened, his mask of control sliding back into place. For now, rest. You've had a difficult day. An understatement so profound it would have made me laugh if I weren't so close to tears. As if sensing my emotional turmoil, Alessandro softened slightly. I know this isn't what you planned, Emma. It isn't what either of us planned, but we'll find a way forward, together. Do I have a choice? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His expression grew serious. Your choices now extend only as far as they don't endanger our child or compromise our security. Beyond that? He shrugged slightly. We'll negotiate. With that ambiguous promise, he escorted me back to my rooms, his hand resting possessively at the small of my back. At the door, he paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Despite everything, he said quietly, I'm glad about the baby. I never thought I'd have a family of my own. The simple confession caught me off guard, reminding me that beneath the dangerous exterior was a man with his own fears and desires, his own concept of family shaped by whatever upbringing had forged him into the person he was now. Good night, Emma, he said, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead, before retreating down the corridor, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing realization that my life had irrevocably changed. not just because of the child I carried, but because of the man who had claimed us both as his. Inside my gilded prison, I moved to the windows overlooking the estate grounds. Darkness had fallen, but security lights illuminated the gardens, revealing armed men patrolling the perimeter. Not just protecting me from Blackwood's people, I realized, but ensuring I couldn't escape. My hand drifted to my stomach, to the tiny life growing there, unaware of the dangerous world it would be born into. Alessandro's heir, a child of two worlds, my ordinary existence and his empire of shadows. What are we going to do? I whispered to my unborn child, tears slipping down my cheeks. There were no good options. If I somehow escaped, Blackwood's men would find me. If I contacted the FBI, I'd be putting my child in danger and betraying Alessandro in a way he might never forgive. And if I stayed, accepting Alessandro's protection and all it entailed, I'd be choosing a life intertwined with violence and power I never wanted. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Come in," I called, quickly wiping away my tears. Maria entered, carrying a tray with tea and what looked like biscuits. "Mr. Vitale thought you might like something soothing before bed," she explained, setting the tray on a small table. I thanked her automatically, struck by this small gesture of consideration from a man who had essentially kidnapped me hours earlier. "He cares for you," Maria said, reading my confused expression. "In his way." "His way involves holding me prisoner," I pointed out. Maria's weathered face creased with sympathy. "Mr. Vitale is complicated. He's had to be, to survive in his world." "Did you know his family?" I asked, curious despite myself. "Before him?" She nodded, pouring the tea with practiced movements. "I served his father and his grandfather before that, 3 generations of Vitales." "Were they all like him?" Maria considered the question carefully. "No," she finally said. "Alessandro is different. His father was cruel for cruelty's sake. His grandfather was cold, calculating. Alessandro," she paused, searching for words. "He does what he believes necessary, but takes no pleasure in it. And he protects those he considers his own. Like possessions," I murmured. "Like family," she corrected gently. "Something he's had precious little of in his life." The revelation stirred something in me, not pity exactly, but understanding. What kind of childhood had Alessandro experienced, growing up in a family built on violence and fear? What had shaped him into the man he was now, capable of tenderness one moment and cold calculation the next? "Thank you for the tea," I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Maria smiled kindly. "Sleep well, Miss Emma. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." After she left, I sipped the tea, chamomile with honey, soothing and warm, and tried to quiet my racing mind. So many secrets revealed, so many questions still unanswered. My hand drifted again to my stomach, to the life that had complicated everything, yet somehow simplified it too. Whatever happened next, whatever choices I made, they would no longer be just for myself. I had a child to consider, a child who would be born into danger regardless of what I did. With that sobering thought, I crawled into the enormous bed, sinking into luxury I'd never known. Despite my fear and uncertainty, exhaustion claimed me quickly, pulling me into dreams filled with amber eyes and whispered promises of protection that felt more like threats. I woke to sunlight streaming through partially opened curtains, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, the silk sheets against my skin, the vast expanse of the mattress beneath me, the ornate ceiling above, all reminders that yesterday hadn't been a nightmare, but my new reality. A soft knock preceded Maria's entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Emma. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I should have," I admitted, sitting up against the plush pillows. She smiled sympathetically as she set the tray across my lap. Fresh fruit, yogurt, toast with what looked like homemade jam, and herbal tea. "Your body needs rest, especially now." My hand instinctively moved to my stomach. 6 weeks pregnant. The thought still seemed surreal. "Mr. Vitale asked me to inform you that the doctor will arrive at 10. Maria continued, moving to open the curtains fully. "There are clothes in the bathroom for you." "I don't suppose I could make a phone call?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Maria's expression softened with pity. I'm afraid that's not possible yet. For security. For control, I thought bitterly, but nodded my understanding. No point making Maria's job more difficult when she'd shown me nothing but kindness. After she left, I ate the simple but perfect breakfast, my body demanding nourishment despite my emotional turmoil. Then I showered and dressed in the clothes provided, leggings, a soft cashmere tunic, and ballet flats, all in muted shades that somehow fit perfectly. The casual elegance of prison attire. At precisely 10, Maria escorted me to a study that had been converted into a makeshift examination room. Medical equipment stood alongside antique furniture, modern necessity intruding on old-world luxury. The doctor was a distinguished man in his 60s, with salt-and-pepper hair and kind eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. Miss Palmer, he greeted me, using my false name with no indication he knew otherwise. I'm Dr. Bennett. Please, make yourself comfortable. His manner was professional and gentle as he conducted a basic physical examination, drew blood, and prepared for an ultrasound. Throughout, he explained each step, treating me as a patient rather than a possession, a courtesy I appreciated more than I could express. This will be cold, he warned as he applied gel to my abdomen. Let's take a look at your baby. My baby. The words sent a shock through me, a strange mixture of fear and something warmer, more primal. Until this moment, the pregnancy had been an abstract concept, a complication in an already complicated situation. But as Dr. Bennett positioned the wand, and a rapid whooshing sound filled the room, the reality of the life growing inside me became undeniable. That's the heartbeat, he explained, his voice gentle. Strong and regular, exactly what we want to hear. Tears filled my eyes unexpectedly. That sound, fast, persistent, alive, was my child, Alessandro's child, a tiny being with its own heartbeat, oblivious to the dangerous circumstances of its creation. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Bennett continued, adjusting the screen so I could see the small blob that would become our baby. Based on measurements and your last period, you're right about 6 weeks along, due date approximately mid-July. I stared at the screen, mesmerized by the tiny flickering that indicated a heartbeat. It's so small, I whispered. About the size of a sweet pea right now, he confirmed with a smile, but growing rapidly. The door opened, and Alessandro entered, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. Doctor? Dr. Bennett nodded. Everything is progressing normally, Mr. Vitale. A healthy pregnancy so far. Alessandro's gaze moved to the screen, to the tiny life we'd created. For a moment, his composed facade cracked, revealing wonder and something that might have been fear before he controlled his expression once more. The heartbeat, he said quietly, moving closer. Would you like to listen? Dr. Bennett offered, adjusting a setting that amplified the whooshing sound. Alessandro stood motionless, transfixed by the rapid rhythm filling the room. His hand moved as if to reach toward me, toward the screen, but stopped midway, returning to his side. I'll print images for you both, Dr. Bennett said, breaking the charged silence. Miss Palmer, I'll prescribe prenatal vitamins and provide information on what to expect in the coming weeks. I'd like to see you again in a month, sooner if there are any concerns. I cleaned the gel from my stomach and readjusted my clothing, while Dr. Bennett printed ultrasound images and prepared a folder of information. Throughout, Alessandro remained silent, his expression thoughtful as he watched the doctor work. Once Dr. Bennett had completed his instructions and left us with promises to return in a few weeks, silence fell over the room. Alessandro picked up one of the ultrasound images, studying it with an intensity that made me wonder what he was truly seeing. A child, an heir, or a complication to his carefully controlled life. You'll have everything you need, he said finally, setting the image down. The best care, the best doctors. Thank you, I replied automatically, then felt foolish for expressing gratitude to my captor, however benevolent his imprisonment might be. Alessandro's amber eyes fixed on mine. We need to discuss our situation. Which part? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. The part where I'm an FBI informant carrying your child, or the part where your enemy is hunting me? Or perhaps the part where you've locked me in a gilded cage? A muscle ticked in his jaw, all of it. He offered his hand to help me up from the examination table. After a moment's hesitation, I accepted it, hyper-aware of the warmth of his fingers around mine, the strength in his grip. He led me from the makeshift examination room to his study across the hall, a masculine space of leather, dark wood, and books that smelled of paper and the same cologne he wore. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair near a fireplace where flames crackled despite the mild day outside. I perched on the edge of the seat, too tense to relax. Alessandro poured water from a crystal decanter, handed me a glass, then leaned against his desk rather than sitting behind it, a deliberate choice to avoid the power dynamic such a position would create. "First," he began, "your FBI handler." My fingers tightened around the glass. "What about him?" "He'll be looking for you, wondering why his asset has suddenly disappeared." "Probably," I agreed cautiously. "You'll need to contact him." I stared at Alessandro in shock. "You want me to talk to the FBI after everything I told you last night?" His expression remained impassive. "I want you to reassure him that you're safe, that you're still gathering information, and that you need time." Understanding dawned. "You want me to lie to keep them off your back?" "I want to prevent a federal manhunt that would complicate our situation further," he corrected. "Once Agent Cooper believes you're still working your assignment, he'll be patient. That gives us time to address the Blackwood problem more permanently." A chill ran through me at the implication in his tone. "What are you planning to do? The less you know about that, the better." Alessandro pushed away from the desk and moved to the window, his back to me as he surveyed his estate. "Blackwood has been a thorn in my side for years. His interest in you merely accelerates the inevitable. You're going to kill him," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. Alessandro turned, his expression cold. "I'm going to eliminate a threat to my family." Family. The word hung between us, loaded with meanings neither of us had fully grasped yet. We weren't a family in any traditional sense. Just a Mafia boss, his pregnant captive, and the unborn child connecting them. "And after?" I asked, setting down my glass before my shaking hands could betray me. "After Blackwood is dealt with. What happens to me? To us?" I gestured to my stomach. Something softened in Alessandro's expression. He crossed the room to kneel before my chair, bringing his face level with mine in a gesture that surprised me with its humility. "That depends on you," he said quietly. "On what you want." The question caught me off guard. What I want? Since when does that matter? It has always mattered. His hand reached for mine, warm and solid. "From the moment you walked into my hotel room." I pulled away, confusion and anger flaring. "You've given me no choices, Alessandro. You took me from my life, isolated me from my friends, made decisions about my future without consulting me. That's not how people treat someone whose wants matter." He absorbed my outburst without flinching. "I acted quickly to protect you. Both of you," he amended, glancing at my midsection. "The circumstances required immediate action, not democratic deliberation." "And now? Do the circumstances still require my imprisonment?" Alessandro's jaw tightened. "You're not a prisoner. You're under protection." "Semantics," I scoffed. "If I can't leave, can't contact my friends, can't make my own decisions, what would you call it?" He stood abruptly, pacing the length of the study with controlled energy. "What would you have me do, Emma? Release you back to your apartment, your minimum wage jobs, your FBI handlers, leave you vulnerable to Blackwood's men? Abandon my child to whatever fate awaits it in your world? It's my child too," I reminded him, rising to face him. "And yes, I'd like the freedom to choose my own path, dangerous or not." Alessandro moved toward me with predatory grace. "Even if that path puts our baby at risk?" The question struck like a physical blow. He'd found my weakness, the fierce, unexpected protectiveness I already felt toward the tiny life inside me. I wouldn't risk my child's safety, and he knew it. "That's not fair," I whispered. "Nothing about this situation is fair," he agreed, stopping inches from me. "But it is reality. Our reality now." I looked up into his amber eyes, searching for cruelty or manipulation, but finding only resolve and something deeper, more complex. Concern. perhaps even tenderness. "I don't want to be your prisoner," I said quietly. "Or your possession. I can't live like that, even in luxury." "Then be my partner," he replied without hesitation. The suggestion startled me. "Your partner?" "The mother of my child, my companion. Eventually, perhaps more." His hand rose to cup my cheek, thumb brushing gently across my skin. "But yes, my partner in facing whatever comes next." The offer was tempting in ways I didn't want to admit, even to myself. There had been a connection between us from that first night. Not just physical attraction, but something deeper. A recognition that defied logic or explanation. "You barely know me," I reminded him. "The real me, not the waitress you met at the gala." A small smile touched his lips. "I know you're brave, resilient, loyal, even to an FBI agent who exploited your grief. And I know there was truth between us that night, regardless of the circumstances that brought you to my door." His perception unnerved me. "And my history with the FBI, my betrayal?" "You were a pawn in their game," he said dismissively. "Used and manipulated by men with badges who claim moral superiority while employing the same tactics they condemn in others. That doesn't excuse what I did." "No," he agreed, "but it explains it. And explains why you didn't report about me, why you kept our night together separate from your assignment." His confidence in my feelings was both accurate and presumptuous. "You seem very sure about my motives. Am I wrong?" he challenged softly. I couldn't meet his gaze, couldn't lie about this. "No," I admitted. Alessandro's hand slid to the nape of my neck, drawing me closer. "Then be honest with yourself, Emma. There's something between us that existed before you knew about the baby, before I knew about your connection to the FBI. Something real." His proximity was intoxicating, awakening memories of our night together. His hands on my body, his lips against my skin, the way he'd made me feel both protected and exposed, vulnerable and powerful. "Even if that's true," I whispered, "it doesn't change who you are, what you do." "No," he agreed. "I am what life has made me, as are you. The question is whether we can build something new together, something better for our child." His vision was seductive, not just security and luxury, but belonging, purpose, a family constructed from the broken pieces of our separate lives. Yet beneath the promise lurked the reality of who Alessandro was, a man who had ordered deaths, who controlled a criminal empire, who would eliminate Marcus Blackwood without remorse. Could I live with that knowledge? Could I raise a child in that world? "I need time," I said finally, "to think, to adjust to all of this." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Time I can give you, but not freedom, not yet. Not until Blackwood is no longer a threat." It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a concession, a recognition of my autonomy that I hadn't expected. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic decency," he said, a shadow crossing his features. "I've taken enough from you already." The admission of wrongdoing surprised me, revealing a capacity for self-reflection I hadn't anticipated. This man was more complex than the cold Mafia boss I'd initially perceived, capable of tenderness and remorse alongside ruthless protection of what he considered his. "I'll arrange for you to call your FBI handler tomorrow," Alessandro continued, moving toward his desk. "Maria will help you prepare what to say. Just enough to keep him at bay while I deal with Blackwood." I nodded, recognizing both the trust and the constraint in his offer. "And after that?" Alessandro looked at me, his gaze softening as it dropped briefly to my stomach before returning to my face. "After that, we begin building a future. Together, if you'll have me. Apart but connected, if you won't. But either way, safe and provided for." The options weren't as limited as before. Not complete freedom, but not permanent captivity either. A choice of sorts, with boundaries defined by our shared responsibility to the child we'd created. "I should rest," I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of our conversation. Alessandro nodded, moving to open the study door. "Of course. We can continue this discussion when you're feeling stronger." As I passed him, he caught my hand, pressing something into my palm. I looked down to find one of the ultrasound images. "Our baby's first picture. We made this," he said softly. Whatever happens next, remember that we created something miraculous together. The simple statement stripped away all the complications. The FBI, Blackwood, Alessandro's criminal empire, leaving only the fundamental truth. We were connected now, irrevocably, by the tiny life growing inside me. I clutched the image to my chest and nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. As I returned to my rooms, guided by the ever-present Maria, I felt something shift within me, not acceptance of my situation exactly, but recognition of its complexity. There were no simple solutions, no clear path forward that didn't involve compromise and risk, but for the first time since Alessandro had found my pregnancy test, I felt the faintest flicker of hope, not just for survival, but for something more, something neither of us had dared to imagine until a tiny heart began beating, binding our fates together. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo of luxury and uncertainty. My gilded cage expanded gradually, from my suite to the entire East Wing, then to the gardens surrounded by high walls and watchful guards. Alessandro kept his word about giving me time to think, to adjust, maintaining a respectful distance while ensuring I had everything I needed. I spoke to Agent Cooper as planned, feeding him carefully crafted half-truths about getting closer to Alessandro, about needing more time to gain his trust. The lies came easier than I expected, my loyalty shifting imperceptibly from the people who had exploited my grief to the man whose child I carried. Cooper's eagerness to use me despite the obvious dangers only reinforced my growing disillusionment with the FBI's methods. They had never cared about justice for my parents, only about building their case against the Blackwoods by any means necessary. I thought often of my father during those quiet days, wondering what he would think of my situation. He had worked for criminals, yes, but kept my mother and me insulated from that world. Now I was carrying the heir to a rival organization, considering a life within the very circles he had tried to shield me from. The irony wasn't lost on me. Alessandro and I established a cautious routine, sharing dinner each evening, talking about our childhoods, our interests, carefully avoiding the volatile subjects of his business and my FBI connection. He told me about growing up as the reluctant heir to the Vitali empire, about losing his mother to cancer when he was 14, about the brutal education his father had forced upon him. I shared stories of my parents, my interrupted nursing studies, my dreams of helping others. In these conversations, I glimpsed the man beneath the Mafia boss exterior, intelligent, surprisingly well-read, capable of tenderness and humor I wouldn't have believed possible when I first found myself his captive. One evening, as we walked through the rose garden after dinner, Alessandro broke our unspoken rule of avoiding business discussions. "Blackwood is making his move," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Against both of us." My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, now showing the slightest curve beneath my dress. "What do you mean?" Alessandro guided me to a stone bench beside a burbling fountain, screening us from any potential observers. "He's spreading rumors that I've aligned with the FBI using you as my contact." "That's absurd," I said. "He knows I was working for the FBI against him, precisely why the rumor is dangerous," Alessandro explained. "It suggests I've turned you, that we're using your FBI connection to eliminate him while securing immunity for my own operations." The calculated brilliance of the accusation chilled me. Your people would think you betrayed them. His would see you as an even bigger threat. Alessandro nodded grimly. "It's a clever move. Creates enemies for me on all sides. Including the FBI, I realized. If they believe I've switched loyalties completely, they'll consider me compromised, which puts you in even greater danger," he confirmed, his jaw tight with controlled rage. "Blackwood is trying to isolate us, make us vulnerable from all sides." Fear settled like ice in my veins. What are we going to do? I didn't miss the significance of my words. We, not you. Somewhere in these strange weeks, I had begun to see our predicament as a shared challenge rather than Alessandro's problem holding me captive. His hand covered mine, warm and reassuring. "I've put plans in motion, but I need something from you first." "What?" I asked warily. "The truth about what the FBI has on Blackwood. Everything you know about their investigation, their evidence, their methods." I hesitated, the last remnants of my former loyalty giving me pause. "Why?" Alessandro's amber eyes held mine. Because I'm going to give them Blackwood, Emma. Not through violence, but through information. Let them destroy each other while we remain untouched. The strategy surprised me, more subtle and less bloody than I'd expected from a man in his position. You'd work with the FBI after everything they've done? Not with them, he clarified. I'll simply ensure they receive what they need to take Blackwood down legally. Anonymous tips, documentation of his operations, witness testimonies. He goes to prison, the FBI gets their conviction, and the threat to us is eliminated without direct action on my part. Without bloodshed, I said softly, understanding the significance of his approach. Alessandro's expression grew serious. I won't pretend my hands are clean, Emma, but I've been working to legitimize our family interests for years, to move away from the violence that defined my father's era. Blackwood is one of the last obstacles to that transition. This revelation aligned with whispers I'd heard during my time with the FBI, that the younger Vitale was different, that he had distanced himself from the more brutal aspects of the organization while maintaining its power structure. If I help you, I said carefully, what happens afterward? To us? Alessandro took both my hands in his. That depends on what you want. I told you before, you have choices now. What choices exactly? Stay with me, he said simply. Not as a captive, but as my partner, my equal. Help me build something better than what my father left me, something our child can inherit without shame. The offer hung between us, tantalizing in its possibility. And if I don't want that life? I asked, needing to understand all options. Then I set you up somewhere safe, with everything you and our child need. You'd have protection, financial security, complete freedom, except for one thing. What's that? His expression hardened slightly. Our child remains connected to me. I won't be excluded from their life. I nodded, having expected nothing less. And the FBI? Once Blackwood is dealt with, we sever that connection permanently. I have leverage to ensure they leave you alone. The plan was comprehensive, offering me more genuine choice than I'd had since my parents' murder. Stay and help Alessandro reshape his empire into something more legitimate, or leave with his support and protection, co-parenting from a distance. I need to know one thing, I said, meeting his intense gaze. If I stay, what exactly am I agreeing to? I won't be involved in anything illegal, Alessandro. I won't expose our child to violence or danger. He nodded, understanding my boundaries. I've been transitioning our interests to legitimate businesses for years. Real estate, hospitality, technology investments. What remains of the old operations will continue to diminish. I can't promise overnight transformation, but I can promise direction and purpose. His sincerity was palpable, his vision of the future clear and determined. This wasn't a hastily constructed promise to appease me, but a path he'd already begun walking, before I entered his life. Why would you do this for me? I asked softly. Change your entire world? Alessandro's expression softened as he reached out to touch my cheek. Not for you. Because of you. Because seeing my world through your eyes has confirmed what I already knew. That I want something different for our child than what my father wanted for me. His hand drifted to my slightly rounded abdomen, and because what I feel for you isn't something I'm willing to lose. The admission hung in the air between us, more intimate than any physical touch. Alessandro Vitale, feared Mafia boss, was offering not just protection or partnership, but his heart, damaged and guarded though it might be. I need to think, I said, overwhelmed by the implications of his offer. Alessandro nodded, withdrawing his touch reluctantly. Take whatever time you need, but we must move against Blackwood soon, before his accusations gain more traction. That night, I lay awake for hours, weighing my options, considering futures I'd never imagined. The practical choice would be to accept Alessandro's protection from a distance, to raise our child with his financial support but separate from his world. Yet something deeper pulled me toward the more difficult path, staying, helping him transform his empire, building something together from the broken pieces of our separate lives. Not just for our child, but for ourselves. By morning, I'd made my decision. I found Alessandro in his study, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted, as if he hadn't slept. He rose when I entered, his expression guarded yet hopeful. "I'll help you with Blackwood," I said without preamble. "I'll tell you everything I know about the FBI's investigation." Relief flickered across his features. "Thank you." "And afterward," I continued, my heart racing, "I want to stay, not as your prisoner or your protected asset, but as your partner, your equal." Alessandro moved around his desk slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might change my mind. "You're certain?" I nodded, placing a hand on my stomach where our child grew. "I want our baby to have both parents. I want them to grow up knowing they're loved, protected, and I want to help you build something they can be proud of. It won't be easy," he warned, stopping before me. "Changing generations of history never is." "I know." I met his gaze steadily, but nothing worth having ever comes easily. His smile then, warm, genuine, transforming his usually guarded features, made my breath catch. Alessandro reached for me, his touch gentle as he drew me into his arms. "I promise you won't regret this," he whispered against my hair. "I'll spend my life making sure of it." For the first time since finding myself in his world, I felt truly safe, not because of the walls and guards surrounding us, but because of the commitment we were making to each other, to our child, to a future neither of us had dared imagine before. The next 2 months passed in a whirlwind of carefully orchestrated events. I provided Alessandro with everything I knew about the FBI's investigation into Blackwood, their evidence gaps, their primary targets, the specific crimes they were building cases around. Alessandro used this information to compile an anonymous dossier that found its way to the FBI's offices, containing exactly the evidence they needed to make their case. When Marcus Blackwood was arrested 3 weeks later in a spectacular dawn raid covered by every news outlet in the city, Alessandro and I watched from the security of our home, his arm around my shoulders, his expression satisfied but not triumphant. "It's done," he said simply as Blackwood was led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. The FBI investigation expanded, engulfing Blackwood's entire organization while mysteriously avoiding any connection to the Vitalis. Agent Cooper tried contacting me repeatedly, but Alessandro's lawyers intervened, using evidence of the FBI's manipulation of a grieving young woman to secure my permanent separation from their investigation. My obligation to them was officially terminated, my freedom from both Blackwood and the FBI secured through legal channels rather than violence. True to his word, Alessandro accelerated the transformation of his business interests, distancing himself from the old operations while strengthening his legitimate ventures. There were difficult moments, resistance from those who benefited from the status quo, but his authority remained absolute, his vision clear. I found my own place in our new reality, completing my nursing degree through private tutors, establishing a foundation for children who had lost parents to violence, using our resources to create something meaningful from my own traumatic experience. By the time our daughter was born, Sophia, named for Alessandro's mother, the world we occupied had begun its transformation. Not perfect, not completely clean of its complicated history, but moving steadily towards something better, something we could eventually explain to our child without shame. Alessandro changed in those months too, the hard edges of the Mafia boss softening into the protective father and devoted partner. The man who had once frightened me with his cold control now sang Italian lullabies to our daughter, his amber eyes filled with wonder as she gripped his finger with her tiny hand. "She has your eyes," he whispered one night, as we stood over her crib, watching her sleep. "Thank God for that." I leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "And your determination. Look at that grip." His arm tightened around my waist. "She'll be extraordinary, both fierce and gentle, like her mother, and protective and loyal, like her father," I added, turning in his embrace to face him. Alessandro studied me with an intensity that still made my heart race. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly, the question revealing a vulnerability few would ever witness. I thought about my answer carefully, wanting complete honesty between us. "I regret the circumstances that brought us together," I said. "The fear, the manipulation, the danger. But I don't regret where we've landed." His hand cradled my face, thumb brushing my cheek with infinite tenderness. "Nor do I." You've given me more than I ever thought possible. A daughter, a purpose beyond power, a future worth fighting for. We gave those things to each other, I corrected gently, and we'll give Sophia something neither of us had. A family built on choice rather than circumstance or obligation. Alessandro's kiss was both promise and gratitude, sealing the understanding between us. We had begun as captive and captor, thrown together by secrets, danger, and an unexpected pregnancy. But we had chosen to become something else entirely, partners in the truest sense, building a future from the ashes of our separate pasts. Outside our daughter's nursery, beyond the walls of our home, the world remained complicated and sometimes dangerous. The transformation of Alessandro's empire would take years, perhaps generations, to complete fully. But within our family, within the bonds we'd forged through choice rather than coercion, we had found something neither of us had dared hope for when our paths first crossed. Not just safety or security, but belonging. Love. And as I watched Alessandro gently tuck the blanket around our sleeping daughter, his expression tender in a way few would ever witness, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not a captive any longer, but a woman who had found freedom in the most unexpected place. Beside a man who had once frightened me, now transformed by the same love that had changed me. Our beginning might have been written in secrets and fear, but our future would be crafted with intention and hope, and that made all the difference.